This is live. We're rolling it.
This is it. Okay, this is it.
What's your question, Ryan? What's your question?
This is not even a question. My question is, of all the rig building that we've been doing, what are your nightmare, most difficult setup stories? If it's doing a setup, shipping it. I feel like I already know what Grant's is going to be, because I feel like we all just lived it a couple weeks ago watching his social media. But I would love to hear from you guys some stories and a couple different. If you have photos, feel free to show. If you don't, I don't think I'd have any that I left documented. But yeah, let's kind of kick it off with one of you guys. Just, a worst build, not worst build, but just like nightmare stories, and go from there.
Okay. Mason, should I start this one off?
If you feel like there's still some trauma from the recent one,
there's plenty of trauma. I have two, actually.
Okay.
I have two. I was going to start with one that's probably 12 years old now.
Okay, maybe we'll start with that one, since there's some distance. There's some distance from that one.
I need the time. I definitely need the time to before we chat about the more recent one. Yeah.
And your second one is like a nightmare and a bonus of issues after too, if I remember correctly.
No, it's issue one. It's an issue. Peanut butter and sandwich. The bread is an issue. The PB and J in the middle, that's an issue. We got issues all over the place. So to set the mood, it is, I would say 2011. Let's call it 2011. This is probably right at the beginning of Goodwood Audio doing rigs. We know how to solder. We know how to set up a rig okay. Not as far into MIDI. Learning a lot every build. Let's just say that. I'm sure any of you listeners who have ever built a rig, the feeling of going into a build and just like, we're just going to do it and we're going to see how it ends up and hope for the best. That's kind of where we were at back then. It was on a Timon Klein looper, was kind of the heart of the rig. I'll try and share my screen here and I will see if I can get this
I've
thing
never even
going.
heard of that.
That was a
you
popular
might recognize
one.
it. Can you see? This is just one I found on Reverb today. So it's basically this. It's a true bypass looper, no MIDI. It's just the switches, and that's what you get. So nothing all that crazy. He no longer makes these. This is ages ago. It's actually a pretty cool design, cool enclosure, all that. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see on my screen the looper that I'm showing you. I tried zooming in on the pictures, and they're very small. So unfortunately,
I'm shocked it got $420 for a true bypass looper.
Well, who knows when this thing sold though? This is already sold, so this could have been ages ago.
But Timon, it's got kind of like the Lion
listed
King.
8 years ago. There you go.
Okay, yeah.
So this thing's old. So it had one of these loopers. I really enjoyed these loopers back in the day. We did the whole pedal board. I think it was a 12 or a 10 loop. So there's quite a bit going on. We tested the whole board. Everything was perfect. We call the customer, this was a local guy, tell him to come pick it up in Sydney at the house we were working out of. And basically we go to demo the board after everything has been perfect. And he shows up, tries playing through the rig, and we got nothing. And so he's already paid all this money, I don't know, it might have been $1,500 or something to get his setup done. And then he shows up and we can't get his board working. So we're like, oh no, it's probably just an instrument lead. We swap the instrument lead. We check all the power cables. We check every single loop, turn everything off. Nothing. So we basically tell him, like, I'm sorry, man, you're going to have to go and we will obviously try and figure this out and we will come back to you. We'll let you know what happens and we're going to try this again. You can pick up your board for the second time once we fix this thing.
How'd he take it?
To his credit, very well. He was like, things happen. He could have been furious and I wouldn't have blamed him, but he was very kind, which I will say over the years, I always, tell our team and everything, we have some of the best customers. When we mess up, which every once in a while we do, we have very gracious customers. This guy was no exception. So basically what it came down to, we checked every cable, we checked every loop, we checked the true bypass switches to make sure they were all good. Couldn't find a fault anywhere. Finally, we accidentally bumped one of these toggles here. You can see if you can see on my screen, there's a little toggle right in the middle.
Yeah, yeah.
We bumped it as we were testing, and sound intermittently came back in. And so sure enough, when we originally tested this thing, that toggle was in just the right position that it was working. Once we had knocked it, when we were testing after this guy had gone back home and all that, we realized it had been bumped before we even got the looper. The toggle switch had just been, damaged somehow. So as soon as we replaced that toggle, which I think from memory was for a volume loop, like a volume send and return, which we weren't using, as soon as we replaced that toggle, the whole rig just worked perfectly and everything was great. So I don't know exactly the lesson to be learned there other than test everything, every piece of gear, which I know, Mason, you talked about in previous podcasts. But to have a customer come and pick up a rig and it not work is one of the worst feelings I've ever had as far as Goodwood audio related failures. But now I know. Check the toggle. That's my story.
So, and it looked like from the photos that you sent, it looked like the enclosure was riveted. So did you have to like drill out the rivets to fix the switch?
Yeah, so you can see on the screen, everything is riveted in there. Which, to be honest, when you're used to drilling out a 3.5 mil rivet, like it's really easy, it's really quick, but it's you have to have the replacement rivets, the rivet gun, you have to have all that stuff to be able to get it all back together. And there's rivets along the side from memory as well. So you have to take out probably 12-ish rivets to get the whole thing apart.
Yeah.
So it's great because there's no screws that are ever going to come loose. But if you ever need to get inside that thing, it's
the Loop Master is like the same way. I've had to repair some of those in the past, and when I had repaired my first one, I didn't have an air compressor rivet guns. I just had like the manual like hand crank one, and so it's like 10 or 15 cranks on that thing before it breaks off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and then if it doesn't break off clean, then you got to drill it out and then do it again, and it's just
you get strong forearms,
Yeah.
So that's story number one. I'm sure I could come up with probably 5 to 10 stories over the last 12 years or so, but that was the first one that came to mind when you guys were chatting about nightmare pedal boards.
Yeah, no, that's I've had to repair I think a single one of the foot switches on one of those units before, and just getting it open was the first fun part about the whole thing. But those were really popular back then too, those switchers. I think I saw them.
I never even heard of them.
Yeah, they were big for like Hillsong players. Like
Timon was a Hillsong guitar player. Yeah,
so
he was in United.
That makes sense.
And so everyone in Hillsong obviously had him because he's right there, and it was a cool design.
And was Timon a Lion King reference? Isn't that one of the?
From memory, I think he told me this, and he was emphatic that Lion King is actually based on his life story.
Wow.
He's not
which
a
character
baby lion.
Is he?
Is he short?
Oh, Timon, yeah, he's the
meerkat.
Meerkat? Is that what it is?
Not the warthog is.
That's
Pumbaa. He doesn't have a flatulence problem that I'm aware of.
Right.
Pumbaa does, but Timon, very opposite personalities. I don't think they got it quite right in the movie. Timon's quite relaxed and chill.
Okay.
In real life, so that's unfortunate. But they do their best in these.
It'd
movies.
be interesting to be known as the player in Hillsong that could clear the savannah after every meal.
He was always downstage.
Behind the smoke fan.
Wow.
Yeah.
He has a reputation.
I think that's a great kickoff for this. Sorry, I'm like losing my words. Mason, do you have any kind of like any stories that you can share?
I was thinking about it. I'm sorry, Grant. Please.
I would love it if you're just like, no, I don't.
No.
I think it's impossible to be able to. So I have a recent one, and then I have an older one. I was thinking about it when we sort of brought up this possible conversation, a few days ago. I was kind of considering. So there was one that was probably about 10 years ago, maybe a little more. And it was for a client that was in Scandinavia, so not in this country. If for those of you who are unaware, in any case, he had sort of commissioned me to make a board that was similar to something that I had made for another artist that he was a fan of. And at the time, the newest power supply that had just come out, and this is what sort of led me to have a greater understanding of the deficits of this power supply. The power supply that just come out was the Pedal Power 4x4. And this is what replaced the Pedal Power 2 Plus. And at the time, I was experimenting with creating like a second row or a tier pedalboard system, but it was still at that point made out of, you know, the standard pedalboard material. And I would test it with a Pedal Power 4x4 that was 120 volt, and then would replace it with a 230 volt prior to shipping it to him. And when I would test it in my environment, everything would work just fine. And, you know, went through it, everything was working okay. And I believe that I had he had a different, he didn't send me like one piece of the pedal board that I was going, that I had the same unit of, and that I was just going to use as like a stand-in, and then when he got it, he would apply his own unit or something like that. But when I was testing it, I kind of kept the pedal off the board because there was enough lead length for me to do that. What I realized was the problem when he got it, he was getting all this noise, is that the Pedal Power 4x4 was dissimilar from the chassis design of the Pedal Power 2 Plus, which is made out of steel. Pedal Power 4x4 is made out of aluminum. And although I had done this before on other pedal boards where I had maybe put stuff above the power supply, or had put a riser and then had something above the power supply, even though it's a linear power supply, it had shielding from the steel chassis. And the 4x4, because it had so much more power, they didn't use steel, they used aluminum. Because it would generate more heat, and they could use the enclosure as a heat sink, and they could fit more into the unit by doing that and not going with steel and having separate heat sinks on the board. And that ended up creating a field hum. And when I was testing the board and putting sort of this delay reverb pedal kind of separately, like off the board, it wasn't in the magnetic field anymore. But when he would go to assemble it back together, it would have the field hum because it would be directly on top of where the transformer was in the Pedal Power 4x4. And I remember him sending it back from, you know, from Scandinavia, and it was, you know, like hugely expensive to do that. And like getting it back and doing the test and be like, man, this thing is, I don't know what to say. Like it's totally testing great here. There's no issues. And I think in the moment, like it wasn't until later that I put together what the reason was that this happened, because I think I had come into this problem again somewhere else, and then kind of realized like, oh yeah, like we can't use, if we use this supply, we can't put anything near it, like in terms of on top of it, or a riser with something on top of it. Like there's nothing that will work here because it's just got a tremendous field hum, and in the magnetic field, there's no shielding for it anymore like there is on the Pedal Power 2, and we just can't do it, you know. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of switch mode options. I think one of the earliest switch mode options that we saw used, you know, in any capacity in pedal boards was stuff or a power supply made by G-Lab. That was a Polish company, and they had a really interesting take that they did where they basically took like an existing switch mode like computer power supply and like housed it into a metal housing, and sort of did similarly to sort of what Gig Rig does, where they had like it looks like a computer power supply that I think is called the generator. And then it goes into all these separate isolation, like 9-volt. It's a similar thing, except it was all housed in a metal housing, but those components were basically like they took a separate computer charger and they rebranded it and they put it inside of this thing. And I didn't know if they did it because that was like an easy workaround for like underwriters lab certifications, and that they took a supply that already had the certification and then they added these outlets to it that were isolated that somehow didn't violate that. I don't know. But it was actually a really good supply. And, you know, on the heels of us going back and forth and me doing this, I still couldn't replicate what he was hearing. And then that was sort of like frustrating. I was like, oh, I wonder if he's like really sensitive to this, or if he doesn't know, or if he has like an unrealistic expectation around what the noise is. Like I couldn't put it together. And I remember sending it back to him, and sort of on the heels of that, you know, I had this really huge public, you know, disgrace in this product that I had called the Axis One, and you know, I'm sure you can read all about that if you go to the internet and type it in. And so that created sort of a space where, like, you know, he didn't trust that I would be able to fix it. I think he ultimately ended up sending it to Dave Friedman, and Dave Friedman had put that power supply on there, and it like solved the problem. So it was definitely, and I kind of later on figured out, like, oh yeah, through another pedal board that I was working on, it had kind of come up again for me, and I was able to hear the issue, and then I was able to diagnose what it was, and I was like, oh yeah, we can't do this anymore. And then that kind of got me kind of considering, you know, like, oh man, maybe we should really be using more of these switch mode power supplies if we're going to build a board in this fashion. But Ulf is his name. If you're out there, I'll build you a free pedal board, because that one was on me, and I never did figure it out while we were building it. And now, you know, it's some reflection and other experiences led me to understand exactly what it was. So in any case, that was one that was a nightmare, and I never did figure it out. You know, like it went unresolved, and then because of other mitigating circumstances, I was never able to fix it for him properly as I should have.
Jeez.
Crazy. And international shipping to boot.
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. I think it was like 2 back and forths. So it was probably over $1,000 in shipping.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
We used to ship pedal boards when we were just working in Sydney. Most of our customers were still American or from the UK or something, and that was our normal, was just receiving international pedal boards, and shipping was an extra cost. And I still can't believe that people paid for that. I mean, now there's a lot more pedal board builders, obviously, and so you don't need to do that. But still thinking back on that, yeah, people would spend $400 or $500 just to get their board back to them, Australian. So they would spend $400 Australian to get the board from Australia back to America. They're like, man, that's just it's such a huge cost. And I can't imagine having to do that 2 more times on top of that just to fix the issue, or just to not fix the issue. In this case, like, what a nightmare problem when you can't replicate it. And I think that's the thing a lot of people don't understand is, like, I've got this problem with my pedal, I've got this problem with my board, whatever it is. If it can't be replicated, a lot of the times it just can't be fixed. Like, you have to be able to replicate it to trace the problem. And I think there's sometimes this notion in their head, and maybe probably the same with me with other areas I don't understand as well as boards, maybe a computer or some other piece of tech. It's like, just fix it. It's like, no, but we need to find the problem first, and then we can fix it. And that's why I think intermittent problems, ones that come in for a second and then you can't find them again, and then they'll come back at the worst possible moment. They are the trickiest problems to find and to fix. And so I think I feel for you, man. Even though it was 10 plus years ago, what a painful issue to have.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where when new products come out, and as rig builders, you're sort of learning what their limitations are. Sometimes things like this will come up. Now, you know, it's hard to say whether a more experienced builder who, you know, I mean, these were new to everybody. So I don't know that, you know, Voodoo Lab, of course, what was the epitome of power supplies, and I think is still one of the major players, especially as it comes to, you know, kind of standardizing pedal board power supplies. But I think that came to be known, within a few years that they came out, that those had some limitations. The Mondo, the Pedal Power Digital, the Pedal Power 4x4, they do have issues with this magnetic field thing and no shielding. And I think it took some time for people. Yeah, digital is as well. Same
Good
issue. They're all aluminum. And they were kind of the last of the major power supply companies to adopt a switch mode power supply. So the Pedal Power 3 and 3 Plus, and then their extension supplies, the X4, the X8, those are all switch mode and wouldn't have this issue. But there's kind of this transition period between the Pedal Power 2, 2 Plus, and then until the Pedal Power 3, where they release several higher current, higher voltage, variable voltage, larger power supplies, and those all can have this issue if they're not used correctly. But before we continue to hear Brian's story, I want to break for a moment and pass it over to Grant, who's going to tell us about some of the sponsors that make this podcast possible.
So first one I want to tell you guys about, one of my favorites. Brian is there right now, waiting in line to get into the store, probably for some new release or something. I'm not sure. What a convenient way to now be able to do the podcast while you wait, Brian. This is the Guitar Sanctuary. So I know we talk about the Guitar Sanctuary every week. You really can't stop us from talking about the Guitar Sanctuary because they have some of the best gear around. The vast majority, if not all of the gear that we talk about on this podcast can be found at the Guitar Sanctuary. And the best thing about it, if you're a fan of Chairmen of the boards and you're a fan of the Guitar Sanctuary, you can buy some gear there and then get the Chairman, soon to be Brian Omilion, to set up your new board with that gear you just bought at theguitarsanctuary.com. So check them out for any of your gearing needs, and I think you'll be glad you did. The other one I want to tell you guys about is monocreators.com. They do a wide range of products. Some of our favorites here on the show, though, they're angled, lightweight pedal board with tons of room underneath for extra pedals and things you don't need to hit while you're playing your board. Comes with soft bags that actually protect your gear. And then they do another range of soft bags around, guitars and basses, acoustics, all sorts of different formats that you guys can choose from to hold cables, obviously your guitars and all that type of stuff. Favorite soft bags around. And lastly, their backpacks are incredible. I love these backpacks. I know Brian has the whole lineup himself for camera gear, for cables, for
quads,
guitar
guitars,
accessories,
everything.
All sorts of things. Yeah, they got it all. So check out monocreators.com. Use the code. Yes, there is a code. Chairmen, CHAIRMEN, for 10% off your order at monocreators.com. Back to you guys.
All right, Brian, I want to hear your horror story, your nightmare pedalboard story.
I do want to add on real quick to the Guitar Sanctuary sponsor that you just talked about. Obviously that I'm here. The store is running a summer deals promotion right now. So if you text 972-540-6420, text the word promos, you'll be signed up to receive text message alerts on all upcoming summer deals. It might include some KTRs. I'm just saying, not sure. So if you want a Klon KTR, sign up. That's all I'm going to say. And just wait for the text. I know what the first one coming up is, so I would definitely sign up. But
I guess we could put that number down in the video description and the comments. I think, do you know what KTR actually stands for?
Klon the reissue.
I thought it was King of the Road.
I mean, it could be. It could be. Yeah. we get them occasionally in. So if you're interested in one, sign up. We'll have the phone number below and text promos. It's just something we're going to be doing this summer. So take advantage of the cool deals. Yeah, it's super cool. I already know some of the deals.
Were you telling us about that promo just so you could delay talking about your nightmare pedalboard? Is that the thought there? You just really don't want to go there? Too painful?
No. I just would love some extra room in the back here. And
Perfect.
We got a ton of gear back here. No, so my the thing about nightmare stories, and that's the thing that everyone kind of thinks like, oh, well, you guys do this all the time. You do everything perfect every single time. This just doesn't happen. So that's what I like about these stories is like, it just shows that no matter how long we've been doing this, 1 year, 10 years, 20 years, whatever, like we always run into some of the most random issues. So this one is probably the first board that I started doing not for friends. So I charged this person an adequate like amount. It was nothing what my rate, like my hourly rate is now. It was just like something that I like had to like somehow make money off of it. And I built it for him, boxed it up, everything worked. Okay. Built it, tested it, everything worked great. I built it in my apartment and I shipped it off to him. But I did a couple things that I didn't do. I didn't saran wrap the board. I always saran wrap the board when I send it off, just so everything stays compressed. Even dual lock and stuff will pop off sometimes.
Were you using like kitchen saran wrap?
Yes, I was going to our Kroger and getting like
Reynolds
saran wrap. Yeah, some kind of. Now we got industrial stuff here, but I had
never
just like some kind of
foil,
saran.
though.
Never aluminum foil. I just
can't go in the microwave.
And I figured they weren't dealing with aliens or anything, so we didn't really need the aluminum foil. But I didn't saran wrap it, and I didn't insure the board.
Oh no!
Enough. So being newly married too at the time, and having a newborn, like anything extra because having to pay for anything extra was just a huge pain. He got it. The shipper, who I no longer ship with, damaged it severely, from like power stuff being basically as if you went through TSA and they just ripped everything off. This is what it looked like. And I was using, I think, hook and loop at the time. I was, I wasn't screwing wooden blocks down. I was just doing like hook and loop on both sides. And so everything wasn't super locked in. He got it. And it was definitely one of those all in caps emails I got from the gentleman that was like, what the heck? And I'm like, I literally haven't heard from you for over a week since you got the board. Oh, I'm just now opening it and all these issues. And I was just like, what is going on? And we come to find out that everything had shifted. The switcher had popped off, the connections. And I was using like the Switchcraft big pancake plugs and the 380 short plugs at the time.
The 228s or
the 228s, yeah, the 228s and the 380s, yeah. But I wasn't
228s are really hard because there's no ground tabs. You have to like solder it to
nightmare. Yeah.
Oh, and that was one of my big issues.
So do you know how? So I got an old board from a legacy builder, and you know how he dealt with it?
Did he flip it under?
Yeah, he just left the shield, and he just pushed the shield against the cable.
Solderless cable
on the ground. Yeah, on half of it, 50%. The return path is. I
always ended up. This is a total aside, but I always ended up because when I first did it, I would try and solder it down with the like the twisted ground, and I would try and solder it and then make it adhere to the body at the same time, and it starts overheating your cable and you get issues. So I would just pre-tin the body, and then you get the solder to adhere, and then I drop in the ground tab or the ground wire, into the solder, and that seemed to work. But man, those things are an oversight in manufacturing, I would say, as far as that plug goes.
Yeah. It just happened to be one of those builds that because I was so new and I did it for my friends, the couple friends I did it for were like, great, yeah, I have a board that's working, and didn't really give me like, oh, you should be this, you should do that. So it was definitely like a trial by fire in a way in which the guy got it. I think I used instrument cable for a lot of the patch cables just because.
Can you tell us what the all caps said?
I'm thinking he didn't say heck. I'm thinking he used a different 4-letter word.
There's a lot of words where there's a lot of asterisks blanking out the rest of the words. He was a business guy too. So like he was like, I own a company, this and that, and I would never. And I'm just like, I'm just letting you know, I would never ship it out that way. He literally thought I shipped it out that way, and I was like, that's just not like, I would never do that. And I had worked for that same company that shipped the board, which I obviously quit that company because of how horrible they handled the package. So I tried explaining that, and he was just like, it was like nothing I said would like give him any kind of like, okay, yeah, we'll get it figured out. So on my, obviously I paid and got it back and fixed all this stuff, but then I fixed everything. And then he's like, so glad everything's fixed. Now make all these changes. I'm not paying for any of the changes. So being 22, 23 or whatever, when I started doing it like that, I was like, oh, okay. Like, I already feel bad. I can't charge him again or anything, even though it was like another like 6 hours worth of work of doing all these changes, all this rewiring, adding in these different pedals, buying new pedals that were broken. It was a whole,
brutal.
It was a whole mess. I think I ended up like the money I made, I ended up spending all that money on redoing the board, getting new parts and new material, because even the board was cracked. Like, I think the board I was using from some random company, like the wood had broken or something. So like, it was just one of those things you just like I didn't sleep because I was just constantly stressing about it. And that's the thing with a lot of these boards. And when people have issues with their boards, they're shipping, and it's even stuff that we can't handle. Like I can't physically make sure this company, when they ship it, they're going to like treat it like it is a princess, and they're going to put it down softly, because those suckers, they're throwing that stuff. Listen, I work for an airline and a shipping company.
I want the princess treatment to my board.
That's
that'll
like
be an extra 100% charge for the princess treatment.
That's like it's like my kids. Like when my daughter falls down and hurts herself, I swoop her up and I'm like, "Oh, are you okay, baby?" And my son falls down, I'm like, "Dude, just get up. You're fine. Just get up. Come on." Like that's like how shippers and stuff are. They're just like, they throw stuff and they're not even accounting for what is in it. And if it's heavier, typically they throw it harder, which is a horrible way. It's the worst. Even if you put fragile on it, they see fragile or fragile, however you want to say, because it's Italian.
Fragile.
Then they just, they're like, I'm gonna throw it. Well, let's play Olympics of who can toss the box further. So it was just one of those, like, I think I'm thinking about it right now, just reliving that stressfulness of that being like my first board, and like it looked so great. I was so proud of it. I was like, babe, I think I can do this. And then it was like, we got to pay an extra $2,500 to replace all this stuff because I didn't insure it enough. Like, I didn't insure it enough because I wanted to. He only could ship. He could only pay $100 for shipping, but to insure it fully, it was like $150, and he would not go above it. And I was like, well, I'm not going to pay the difference at the time or anything like that. So yeah, whenever you ship pedals, please insure it for the amount in which you have inside the box.
Replacement value.
Even if you do,
including your work,
it can be very difficult to. I mean, it can be a process. It can be a process.
This is a good segue into my my second pedal board issue. You guys are hitting multiple nails on the head.
I'm ready. Got the hammer.
Okay. Let me see if I can show you guys some pictures here first. I'm just going to quickly rearrange my screens if you're watching on YouTube so that you can see the pedal board I am talking about here. Okay. So if you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to share what the board looked like before we shipped it. After everything had tested well, we'd ticked all those boxes. So if you're on YouTube, you can see a main junction on the left-hand side. This junction basically was a dry input, 2 dry outs, one of which had this is going to confuse you if you don't have a diagram in front of you. But basically 1 dry input, 2 dry outs for 2 separate dry amps. One of the dry amps had another loop in it for a multi or for a doubler, so you could widen the dry signal path between the 2 dry outs. It had a bass out with XLR, and then it had 2 wet outputs. All of these outputs could be controlled by the PBC to mute per preset. And then it had summing and phase and, all that type of stuff, so that all of these outputs would work in conjunction with each other if there were any issues. So the junction itself, lots going on. Then you get into the board, and the board was just a monster of a rig. I'm just going through the photos here. I think it was 35 fixtures all up.
Golly.
5 power supplies.
What's that Morningstar? Is that
That's their MIDI splitter. The reason I use a Morningstar as a side, Strymon pedals, I don't know why Strymon does this. Maybe you guys have some more insight. Strymon, for their TRS MIDI pedals, do not optically isolate the MIDI input.
I see.
So if you daisy chain them with something like a disaster area MIDI box, which has 4 TRS outputs, disaster area optically isolates their 5-pin input, but not the individual TRS outputs.
Interesting.
And so you can get ground loops in your MIDI chain. But the Morningstar, they isolate every output. So does Conduit. So does a few other ones as well, a few of the other main ones. But Morningstar is the most outputs in the smallest form factor for the best price.
Are those 1/4-inch outputs or 1/8-inch?
1/8.
1/8, okay.
So they have a 5-pin in, a 5-pin out, adjustable. 6 of them are adjustable. So you can just use a normal TRS cable and then you can adjust it inside the Morningstar. 2 of them are not. So it's actually a really good unit. I think it's $80.
Wow.
So as far as MIDI splitters go, that one's incredible. And the MIDI chain on this thing was, 10 pedals. It was massive. So this was months of preparation. It was a 45-hour build.
It looks it.
Once all the prep was done. And it was, it was a bit of a work of art. I was really proud of everything that was done. Not that I built it. David built this one.
Does this do guitar and bass?
Guitar and bass. It's a wet, dry, bass, dry, wet rig. So absolute. So it's basically, I think the guy that owns this board has a band where I think he's one of only a few musicians, and he covers, with his electric guitar, he covers both the bass and the electric side of things. So all the paths are separate. So you can run bass at the same time as electric if you wanted to. The Meg X, there's a Meg X under the one of the risers. The Meg X is holding 4 or so bass pedals, and then the next loop is a send for the bass out. Let's call it loop 5. The same loop return is the guitar in. So you can reorder all the effects in the Meg X to interchange between bass and guitar, and then it goes into the PBC 10, which is all guitar. So yeah, this thing was an absolute monster. What ended up happening is we tested everything out. David did the full tests, whole bunch of MIDI programming, all that. Package it up like you wouldn't believe. We did a box within a box according to the shipping company, who I will not talk about because we're still in communication. The shipping company, according to their, this is how you should pack a box. I went through that point by point. So big cardboard box, an inch of foam, flight case. Inside the flight case was the pedal board. This thing, as I'm sure you guys can all assume what is coming next, showed up unbelievably damaged to the point of the rig didn't work. Only a couple of the signal paths could actually even get a signal through them. The tube inside of the bass revolt, which is a 2 notes bass amp cab sim, that thing had popped out of its socket inside the pedal. The pedalboard flight case had a hole through it. It was cracked. What else was going on? And the thing that got me with all of this is the shipping company said that the cardboard box had been used once before, so that the insurance I put on it was void. This was after about 2 months of talking to them. We insured this for replacement value, Brian. So this was back in February of this year. I'm still talking to the shipping company trying to get the insurance sorted. Like, it's been an absolute nightmare. I put in 20 hours with the shipping company alone just on claim details, trying to get this thing sorted. So in the meantime, and the best part of the story, there's that cardboard box thing. which was then an inch of foam.
Do you,
then
do you
a
have any
flight
photos
case.
of this?
I do somewhere, but
It's
not.
okay.
Maybe I'll send them to you for anyone on YouTube. Maybe we can edit them in or something. I'll send you a couple photos. But the thing that killed me is that this shipping company, mid-transit, unpacked our board, took it out of the flight case, flipped it upside down, repacked it in the flight case, removed a bunch of foam, put it back in the box, and continued the shipment. And so now this pedal board for half of the shipment is upside down, and there's no support because the whole flight case was built with the tiered system in mind. So support, all the foam is in the right place when the pedal board is in the case the right way up. And so now they've flipped it upside down and there's no support. So pedals popped off and we're just rattling around, bashing into each other for the rest of the shipment with no protective foam on the outside of the case. And so I tell them, I tell the shipping company, you're not responding to my claim that you guys unpacked my board, flipped it upside down, and continued on the shipment. They don't even acknowledge me when I put that in an email or talk to them on the phone. They just talk about the cardboard box on the outside that had been slightly used before. So that has been unbelievably frustrating for me, let alone the customer who has just spent thousands of dollars in gear, the setup, all that, and now has had to cancel tours because he doesn't have this centerpiece of his touring rig. So the last half of the story is basically customers fed up and waiting. And basically, and he was, I have to say to his credit, again, best customers in the world, has been so patient and obviously very frustrated at the shipping company, but with me been extremely patient and just stand-up guy. So then he's like, I can't miss any more tours. Let's build another rig and we'll add it to the claim if we need to. And so I went down to Washington, rebuilt the rig in what I thought I could do. I thought I could do a 2-day turnaround for a slightly simplified board. Still big board, but I thought I could do it. And on night one, I started getting chills. This is down in Washington, so it's not in my own home. It's at one of our guys that works for us in his basement. I just figured I could do it there. I started getting chills on night one. Just feel like absolute garbage. Turns out I realized halfway through I got COVID, but I have to get this board done because if I can't get the board done, then he misses his next tour, which I told him I'd have it ready for. So extended from 2 days to 4 days while having COVID and feeling like absolute trash. Finally get the board done, ship it out to him, and then he was able to go on and go from there and start playing some shows. But this has probably been, I would say, one of the most stressful, as far as the setup goes, the stressful few months in 12 years of doing rig building and doing Goodwood audio, mainly just because of the shipping company being so ridiculous. And that's even with the full insurance. So even, we ship all of our boards with full replacement value. That does not mean you're going to get a claim back. It's your best shot at getting a claim and getting paid back, but it's by no means a guarantee. I think I've had to do 2 big claims in my career. Every time, 2 different shipping companies as well. Every time the shipping company does every little tiny thing they can to weasel out of it, even when it's blatantly obvious. And Brian, like you said, it looks like the damage that was received on both of these claims I've done in the past, it looks like they were on the back of the truck, pedal board over their head, and dropped it on the ground, like from 8 feet off the ground type thing. The damage is catastrophic. So that's my long-winded story.
That's crazy. That's crazy. I mean, it's I think it's a real bummer, and this is unfortunately a just a common story that a lot of people have. I know that there are some people that I've worked with before that that are touring pros or famous musicians on their own, and they actually insure through a third party, and so that they don't even have to deal with. They're like, yeah, you don't need to insure it. I have a third party sort of insurance for this. So they've probably just dealt with it and they're just like, yeah, it's not even worth it to try to duke it out with FedEx or UPS or whoever it is. I do have a story for you that will make you feel better, a win for Tone. But before I do, I want to talk to you about a couple of sponsors that make the podcast possible every single week. And one of which are our friends over at the Sweetwater Gear Exchange. And I have something exciting just to prove that I'm actually a frequent and regular user of the Gear Exchange. You can check out right now. I'm selling some pedals on the Sweetwater Gear Exchange. I have a Dimension C, an Old Blood Noise Endeavor signal blender, a stereo chorus flanger pitch shifter from TC Electronics, which I've modified to 18 volts, so no AC power supply, Boss OD1, Marshall Governor, Chicago Iron, Octavia. I've been having some really great success utilizing their service for the Sweetwater Gear Exchange. I absolutely love it. And I can't recommend. Oh, and here's Oakley. Here's Zeke. Everybody's here.
The whole family.
The whole family's here.
The whole fam.
Yeah. So I'm a huge fan of the Sweetwater Gear Exchange. I cannot recommend it more highly. And I think that everybody should be using it. I think that it's a great way to move your used gear and to be able to have lots of eyes on. I'm actually going to have our friends at Sweetwater hopefully cash me out with the Sweetwater gift cards, which means I don't have to pay any seller fees on the money that I earn. And I think I might be keeping an eye on one of those Dr. Z-Rec amplifiers.
Yes.
So
beautiful.
Thinking about taking all my earnings from all these pedal sales and applying it toward a Z-Rec, because I really love the train wreck sound, and Dr. Z has done a great job of trying to get those that train wreck Ken Fisher tone in an amplifier. So that is the first sponsor. The second sponsor, if I can remove myself from screen share, let's see if I can do it. Let's see. Are you guys still on my screen share here?
Yeah.
There we
It was
are.
just
There
went
we go.
away.
Yeah.
There we are. And the second sponsor I'd like to talk to you about is our friends over at Stringjoy. Now, Stringjoy is the only string company that I have found that makes an uncoated string that lasts and performs like a coated string. I am a self-proclaimed string destroyer. I, for whatever reason, have corrosive hands, and through diet and all different sorts of natural and homeopathic remedies, have not been able to change the fact that I have corrosive sweat, and I just continue to kill strings, except for those that are made by Stringjoy. I can use uncoated strings, which sound better, have a brighter, beautiful tone than any of the coated strings that often just sound dull, and I get the longevity of a coated string. I absolutely love it, and I know that the Chairmen have just received their own shipments of Stringjoy strings, and so they too will get to be able to sing the praises soon of Stringjoy, and they're offering our listeners 10% off using the code BOARDS, BOARDS, getting 10% off their entire order at Stringjoy. Head over to stringjoy.com and use the coupon code BOARDS to get 10% off their first order. They also have subscription services, so you can get strings delivered directly to your door every single month. All right. Those are our sponsors. Let's hear some more.
You're gonna make us feel better.
Yeah.
I got to
need it,
make
man.
you feel better. That's
I'm getting stressed out all over again talking about it. Pick it back up.
Okay, so this is a really interesting story, and I believe a win for Tone.
Oh,
So many years ago, maybe 5 years ago, I did the Nashville NAMM show, the summer NAMM show, and I had I bought a Pelican case that allowed me to fit 2 layers of pedal boards that were our demo boards. So like it was like one layer, then there's like a foam divider, and then another pedal board, and then foam, and then I could ship 2. So I shipped them all out through. I don't remember whether it was FedEx. I think actually it was FedEx. I think it was FedEx. So in any case. And one thing I do, and I should say this to somebody or anybody that's shipping, I always put inside of the case my the address and where it's going. It's not like a piece of computer paper, in the event that like the label gets torn off or something happens. If somebody opens the case, they could see where it was supposed to go. if they're an honest person or it is the shipping company, whatever. So in any case, I take, after the NAMM show, there's a FedEx kiosk or a UPS kiosk. I'm pretty sure it was FedEx kiosk inside of the convention center in Nashville. I deliver the cases and all that stuff. Then they, I've already got it pre-labeled and they ship it out. So, I'm tracking it. I get all of the gear except for one of the 4 pedal board cases that I have. So I have 4 pedal boards in 2 cases because it's 2 pedal boards per case. One of them never shows up. And the tracking number also shows that it's, that it was never delivered, that it somehow got, was missing in transit, and so it continues to stay missing for, a couple weeks. I contact them and, they're like, oh, this is so weird. We don't know why. Like all the other stuff from that tracking number got delivered, and they ended up paying out the full replacement value for the 2 pedal boards because there just wasn't a leg to stand on and there was evidence. Here's the crazy thing. Like a day after they paid me out, I get a call from somebody and they said, hey, this is really weird. I live in Nashville and I got this case that showed up on my doorstep. And it doesn't belong to me. And I opened the case and I saw that you had, your name and phone number on there. The label had gotten partially damaged and they delivered it somewhere in Nashville. I don't know how. And so I sent the person a label and they sent me the pedalboard case back. And so that was a win for Tone that day, and it was, I was like, what do I do? Do I call back, UPS or whoever it was and say, hey, actually the pedalboard, you delivered it to the wrong place, but I eventually did get it back. I still had to pay for shipping again to get it back to me, but that was a win for Tone.
The real question is did you pay to ship the board back to you with FedEx?
No, I didn't. I know I can't remember whether it was FedEx or it was UPS. It was one of them, but yeah, I just remember they sent me a check for the whatever the amount was.
That's nice.
So there was one win there, but yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any other. Grant gave his second one. I have one other one recently that was actually a frustrating one. We ended up getting to the bottom of it, but I had built a rig for a friend of mine that works in the industry, and the way that we would do the way that we would test the board and the way that I do it now is when I'm building a board, I build so few, it's not so much of an issue. I'll usually wire the input and output of the board first when I'm wiring audio. So then that way, as I wire each successive loop, especially if it's in a switcher, I can just test every loop as I assemble it. So after I wire in loop 1, I have the input and output already wired in, and then I can engage that loop on and off and test that that's working. But what I do as a reference point is I record the guitar first on its own into the amplifier. And then I use that as the reference point that I go back to for noise and fidelity of signal and bypass, which is a really great way to really be strategic as to how much tone is being lost or if there are particular pedals that are real tone suckers. And so anyway, we were doing this, we I wired it up. We were doing this thing. We were doing this as we went. All right, Oakley. And, got the board sounding great. He came and picked it up. And then in his studio, he was getting all this noise, that was not showing up. I know, it's just frustrating, right? So, he brings it back and he lives far away. He lives in Corona, which is near where Fender is. So he's having to drive a long way to get this board to me, right? So he decides, okay, I'm going to drive this thing back. We're going to retest everything. We're going to do it. All right. He comes back and we end up tracing. And we're spending hours going through every single piece, re-recording it, really being, diligent about testing every piece, recording it, listening back to it. it turns out that there was this custom mixer made by a company that sells kind of cheap, buffers and true bypass loopers on Reverb. Don't hit yourself in the head. That makes a summing device where it takes he liked to run his whammy where he would take the dry out and the wet out. He would sum them into one. And this mixer would oscillate in certain conditions, like after it had something about it was unstable, it would oscillate like crazy in certain conditions after it had been on for a little while, and it would start to create this really crazy it was crazy, Oakley. This really crazy sound that would start to buzz really badly. So we fixed that. He gets it back. He's still having this issue.
No.
And I was like, man, he's gonna come back. Turns out that he had installed these LED lights in his studio, and the LED lights would create an oscillation through the pedal board. It would create this issue. So when he turned off the LEDs, then it all started work. Everything sounded like normal, but these these LED kits that people will use to install in their studios, a lot of them will create a really gnarly, oscillation sound that can bleed into other stuff, especially if you don't have great power or it's all in the same power. It was brutal. So I'm glad that we did get to the bottom of it, but it was one of those where you're pulling your hair out, you're trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And you go, Brian, you go.
No, I was just going to say that I have two instances. One of them that I'll talk about. Another one I'll briefly talk about. That's the same thing as some of these builds, I've had to start asking okay, where are you getting the noise from? It's it's in my studio, or it's at my church, or it's at this venue. And each location, I have my own set of troubleshooting questions. I ask, I tell them, please don't be offended when I ask you these questions. These are purely my troubleshooting questions. Is the guitar plugged in? Is this done like this? And they're like, yes, of course it's plugged in. I'm like, I know you're not an idiot. I know that. I just need to go down A through Z of all the steps to do so we can figure out what the heck is going on. And it's always that kind of stuff right there that you're just okay, well, I didn't build your board with LEDs right above me or anything.
Issue sometimes too is phone interference can sometimes be an issue. Some people's houses and service is just really bizarre. And I've had a situation where guys whenever I turn on this pedal, it makes this crazy noise. And I was like, what happens if you put your phone on airplane mode? Or they leave their phone right next to their pedal board or something like that. Yeah. And that's a nightmare for, if you put a phone on top of a tube amp, you'll also sometimes have that issue.
Exactly. You get that, that ticking
especially
noise.
if it's transmitting data or receiving or sending data. Yeah.
Yep.
So
Grant,
or iPads.
You were going to say something, Grant. Yes, iPads. Huge.
I was going to say that I think it would actually be cool because there's a few things that come to mind as you guys are chatting, but how it would be cool to chat for the last little section of this episode about what these issues that we've chatted about today has forced you or caused you to change in your process so that the mistake doesn't happen again. And I think one of the interesting things is a lot of these issues are external to the job that was done. They're environmental factors, or obviously a shipping company or whatever, receiving gear that was damaged, but you didn't realize it. That was my first story. So I'd just be curious to do that, but I feel like we should do, talk about our last couple sponsors, and then we could get into that to finish up the changes that we've now made and implemented.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So our first of two final sponsors is going to be Neural DSP. We all love their plugins, their quad cortexes. I'm currently using a quad cortex, and they just make a really amazing stuff. I constantly am seeing people using their plugins. They are always releasing new stuff, and they just happen to have a discount code for 30% off. So the discount code is Chairmen, CHAIRMEN, for 30% off. And before you get all excited about getting 30% off a quad cortex, it is off of their plugins only right now. If I think they just released a new plugin recently. If it's within the past 90 days that they've released something, the discount
Tom
code
Morello
will not be,
is the new one.
Yeah, the newest one. So
beautiful.
the discount code won't work for them. But if you wait 90 days, if you can just hold out for 90 days, you can get that one on a discount. I know we're all impatient because we're musicians and we want it yesterday. But just, go give them a shout, type in that code and get a discount. The next one will be, and I think is a good one. This is a best. This is a best, that's for sure. Is Bestronics. I got all the dad jokes when I hear this stuff. It's gonna be Bestronics with Brad. Brad with Bestronics. They have a discount called DACHAIRS, DACHAIRS, for 10% off. So if you need cabling, if you need a custom loom from them, Brad is always he makes some of these looms that they're making or his guys are making. They're beautiful and they're high quality and they're robust and everything. They also have plugs, square plugs. I think they do Neutrik, all sorts of MIDI connectors. I get all of my Switchcraft MIDI connectors are behind me from him. I think they just have it all. Rack stuff, cases. You'll see. If you want a good fix of quad cortex racks for all these touring bands right now, go check out their stuff. They're doing redundant quad cortex racks and stuff, but they got it all. So check them out and go buy some stuff with 10% off. So yeah, that was our final sponsor. I think
did you get the coupon code?
Yeah, yep. DACHAIRS, DACHIRS. Yeah, for 10% off. I think the codes are also at the bottom too.
Yeah, you'll also see
in
the
show
screen.
Notes. But I think for for the final section of a thought process, I will say the last rig that I had an issue with really made me change the process, because it's not as simple as saying send me your pedal order. That's what a lot of people how much would 6 pedals be on a board? Yeah. Well, what are the 6 pedals? Is it 6 H90s? Oh, no, it's 6 quad cortexes. Okay, well, that's a big difference. First off, that's insane. But it's just every pedal there's so many different sizes. Those are simple things, but then it comes down to does it have MIDI? Does it have expression? Does it need USB? I just finished up a board where he had you guys built a junction box and it had a USB through. And you wanted to connect that USB to multiple pedals so he could just one cable plug in, which is really handy. But there's just stuff like that, that I'm starting to realize that I have to test. I have to test the board with the USB plugged in to the computer. So if I get a buzz, then I have to figure out why it's buzzing. Thankfully, the way in which you guys built it, Chabot and you guys built it, it was amazing, and it's silent. You don't have any issues. But there's plenty of times where I have plugged a PBC straight into my computer and there was a nasty hum or a buzz or something. As soon as you unplug it, it goes away. So there's all these different things that I'm starting to realize I have to test. Some of them is lighting. Obviously, don't ever power your pedal board from that is plugged into lighting at a stage or something, because it'll be horribly sounding from the power side of it, and you'll get a nasty buzz. But yeah, there's definitely some builds that I've done, like a rack build. I did a rack build with a guy where he was sending a GT22 to the rack, to the RGM gizmo, to 2 different trays of pedals. But then the MIDI was also being split from that rack to his Midas compact rack system and 6 different keys board situations. Whoa. It was insane. He plays 8 different instruments on his StageIt account, so he's always switching. So it goes to 6 different keys. It goes to the big Boss loop station thing. It goes into that. It goes into his computer to trigger Ableton. So it triggers, it's connecting to 15 different things. And he had 9 pages of different instruments and combinations. And he's like, well, I'm getting all these issues. And, I spent 40 plus extra hours because he was local at his house, which I don't ever go to a client's house. And we're troubleshooting it, and it's happening at his house, but it's not happening at my shop. So it's replicating those sounds and stuff. But yeah, it's just it's the question of okay, well, what are you doing? What are you plugging into? Okay, well, I didn't know you were going to plug into 9 extra instrument and 9 extra keyboard systems. So yeah, there's So there's like, depends on the rig and the system that they're running. I'll have a whole handful of questions now. It's just like, you can't not troubleshoot. You can't account for every little thing that's going to happen. Like, oh, like I had one guy, oh, well, what if someone spills a beer on my pedal board? I can't test that. Like, that's not.
I will try though. Like, I will drink the beer and I'll, see how it tastes.
Yeah. So like, there's stuff like that. Like, you can't go, well, what happens if someone steps on my board? Okay, well then you just pray and hope that they miss the board and step on your toe or something. But yeah, no, it's definitely opened up now more of, there's more things you have to kind of anticipate and possibly have to test before the board goes out, even down to like XLR, like splitting XLR and quarter inch. Like, I had one where the guy wanted to send quarter inch to some amps and XLR to the house and do reamping and do this on all this live, and it just, those cause more issues. You get ground loops, you get all sorts of craziness. So yeah, it's definitely been a much more tedious process.
I think the big lesson for me in that is, because I would agree with a lot of that in terms of, I think I've learned to try and, when I'm testing, to try and get as close to the environment that the board will be used in as possible. So even with Mason's first story around the delay, testing the delay off the board rather than on the board where it's going to live, like from that, it's like, oh yeah, maybe I should, for the next one, put the delay on. And I've done the same similar things many times over. Like, yeah, tested great. Like, I don't know why you're having an issue, but get as close to the end environment as you possibly can, whether that be with instruments use or venue use, line outs, plug in all of your outputs if that's how the customer is going to use it, because then that will potentially add ground loops. Even if those outputs aren't even being used for that show, but they're plugged in, that can cause a ground loop. There's just so many little tiny lessons. And I think that's the biggest thing with being a pedal board builder, a rig builder, is the catalog of mistakes that you've made are in kind of direct correlation with how good you are at your job. And, people want the clean cable channels, of which there's no one better than Brian himself. But that's a very small part of what Brian does and what you need to do as a rig builder. The biggest thing you need is like, I've made 300 mistakes and now I know how to avoid them on your board so you don't have to. And I think that's just the biggest part. And then the thing after that, all of us are still learning and will still make mistakes in the future and add to that list. But the biggest thing I'm learning now is, how to ship a board in a way that you assume the company, the shipping company, is going to drop that thing from a high height. And like Brian was saying, not give it the princess treatment. And so we now saran wrap the boards as well. Pack it, there's support on every pedal there, whatever it might be.
I think we need to have a sticker instead of fragile that says princess treatment please or something like that.
See how they treat that thing.
It'll have like a silhouette of like a crown and a nice
it'll be Sleeping Beauty, but instead of Sleeping Beauty it'll be like a pedal board.
That's it. I think we need to start I don't know if Apple AirTags have what's it called when it measures velocity and impacts and all that. I don't think the AirTags have that, but I think I also need to start. Yeah, it's like a gyro or something. I need something like that in to measure, so I can go to the shipping company and say, "Hey, you added 20 G's of force to this pedal board on this date at this time." I need some sort of evidence for future, because it just drives me crazy.
There's actually, I don't know if it's a secondary a company that does it. I don't know why a shipping company would just offer it, but there's something that you can attach to a box, and it has it like that, like 4, so it's drop meter or something. So it's green. So if you get it and it's red because it was dropped or something, that's like something that you can claim, like, you mishandled my
let's get a body cam on these packages,
something, man.
Just get a body cam,
strap a GoPro.
Maybe the chairman just need to start a pedalboard shipping company. That's what we need to do.
Oh my gosh.
Then we can just do princess treatment on all shipments.
Do it all. No, it's that it's just, there's so many, like you said, so many things to account for that nowadays gear is so sophisticated. And like, even back then, like, there were some there's some pedals even now, some vintage pedals that, like, if the pedal's out in the sun for too long, it'll react differently. Like, can't even imagine how something like this one board, like I've considered some boards that I have shipped off saran wrapping the board and then like actually
Dry
I've done
ice.
this one time. Not no try. Oh my gosh. No. Getting like the that spray can that like the foam will expand.
Oh yeah.
And actually doing spray foam in the bag and molding it to the board just to get it to them. Like, just so I'm like, listen, it got to you just fine. I've had to
Just
ship some
a plaster molding around the board.
Yeah, something like it would be like with a garbage rack. Like, I considered it before.
There are those things where they almost operate like a cold or a heat pack, where like you break something and then chemically it creates like a foam. I've had stuff. You know, what I started doing, again, I don't make that many boards anymore, but I think if you go to FedEx and they pack it, there's like, if there's damage, then it's like inexcusable. You know, it's like, it used to be, I don't know if they still do this, but it used to be if you bring them the item and they pack it there, that it's like, you know, bulletproof in terms of the insurance aspect. It's just like, we paid your guys packed it to their standard. Yeah. And there was still damage, you know, like, what else can we do? You know, and it actually wasn't that bad, you know, a lot of the expenses, the materials, but when you're getting bigger boxes and stuff like that, it can be, you know, they can be expensive just to get a box to ship a big pedal board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's, I know, it's always fun to hear. It's always fun to hear other people, like, it's not fun to hear people have issues or stuff, but it just really, like, shows everyone that like we're all humans, we're all people, like we're always learning. Like I'm always like, you know, always learning something new, or that's a new way, like just because like even mechanics or pilots or anything, because I used to be in school to be a pilot, like talking to people that had been pilots for 30 years, like, oh yeah, I'm still learning new things. I'm still doing this. I'm still doing, like, it doesn't matter what you're doing, you're always learning, which is great because you never want to limit yourself and be like if I was a person that was like, nope, I know everything, there's nothing else I can learn, like that would be boring. I think that's the funnest part about this job, is that there's always something different to learn regardless of this. We're using the same switchers because no pedals are created the same. They're all different types of pedals and they're all react differently and combinations and how you stack them, and some of them are going to freak out when you put them in front of the other and you got to figure out why. It's just so it's you know, it's you know, it's life. We're always learning new things. So yeah, I think this is fun
and sometimes frustrating, but mostly
and
fun.
Sometimes exhausting.
Mostly fun. Yes.
Mostly fun.
Well, this was fun. Do you guys have any final thoughts? I mean, it doesn't need to be like, it could just be tips on recommendations on, you know, if you're having an issue with your rig, or like, do you guys have any final thoughts on it? I guess anything really.
I would say, to summarize the episode today, I would say, take your very sweet time testing a rig when you think you're finished. And, don't rush the testing phase. That's all I can say, because that will be the board that you have the issues with when you just rushed it a little bit too quickly. So leave extra time for testing, and I think you'll be very glad you did. A lot of the stuff we talked about today, you know, there's a little bit of extra time maybe in testing, a little bit of extra expense in shipping perhaps, and a few other things, but you will be very glad you took that extra time, spent that little bit of extra money on shipping if something were to go wrong. And so I think it's worth it for those things, speaking from experience. So yeah, that's me. Mason
and Oakley.
Sorry, I sound Oakley's is making fart noises back there. I promise it's I'm not giving you.
It's not a bad amp.
I'm not giving you a Pumbaa. I think, yeah, you know, there's going to be factors on every rig that are going to be different. And I agree, you know, that we're all evolving our styles. We're all evolving our knowledge base. And, you know, there's rigs that, you know, I not that I built them badly, but I know that if I did them today, I would do them different and you know, or do them differently. And because I've I've evolved more of a skill set, and also the technology is changing all the time. The products are changing all the time. And sometimes the best practices around a certain product, especially as it relates to sort of like core pedalboard materials like power supplies, buffers, etc., builders get to know certain stuff, and they tend to, even if maybe new stuff has come out, maybe they'll still tend to rely on the stuff that they know is like a best solution, because sometimes the newest, latest, greatest thing still has some kinks to be worked out, you know, and although maybe it advertises to be such an improvement, it isn't always. And so sometimes time will tell if some of those things end up being the best solution or not as superior of a solution. So I just think that, you know, I think it's good to have some patience. It's good to have some understanding and understand that every rig builder is going to have their blunders. And I don't care if it's a Robert Bradshaw who's been at it for, 40 years, or if it's, any one of us. We're all going to have our bloopers, our mistakes, and, a lot of what you're paying for with more advanced and more skilled people is that they've made a lot more errors, they've run into a lot more issues, and they just have a bigger box of tools to throw at stuff. And so I think that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I love that. I would say my final thoughts is don't cut corners. That's that's a big thing when you're trying to save a couple dollars. Just do the best you can. Just have the mindset that nothing is 100% indestructible. We're stepping on things. We're pulling things in and out of cases. Like, stuff is going to happen, stuff's going to slip off, or a switch is going to go bad and that kind of stuff. It doesn't mean whoever built your rig is, incompetent of building rigs or anything. They're just going to be the ones that's going to help troubleshoot you faster sometimes. So we're all learning, and this is just another day on the journey of Town, jumping in the Miata with you guys. Yeah. And I don't know what the weather is for y'all, but it's hazy over here, but I can see some sun coming through. I can see a little bit of suns up ahead. So until next time, you guys have a great weekend. Happy Monday to all. Or whatever day it is that you're listening to this.
Yeah, maybe if you're, as you said, Daniel at the gig rig, it could be tomorrow for him.
It could be. Well, until next time, you guys have a great weekend, and we'll look forward to next time.
Yeah. You had a great weekend. It's Monday.
I did have a great weekend. I did. It was tiring, but it was great.
All right.
Bye, guys.
See ya.